What's up, everybody? Welcome back to episode 36 of the Punching Down podcast. We are getting back to normal life. I don't know how to put it. I feel like my brain has there's more time to just do nothing, if that makes sense. I don't. That's the thing is, like, I don't even consider myself, like, you meet some people and they're like, oh, I'm a politics junkie. I'm like, I'm not even a politics junkie. It's just the shit's impossible to ignore. There's this, like, famous investor guy. His name's Paul, I think Graham. I follow him on Twitter. But he basically said, like, after the election, he's like, I felt like there was a program, like a background process that was taking up 5% of my CPU that just got killed, essentially, like in computer terms. We started off on a very nerdy foot, but you know when like your computer's not working and then you go into like the system and there's like, you have some program that's just taking up all your memory just in the background. It's not even doing anything. That's what I feel like. But so looks like Trump's done. Not the last we're going to hear from him. That's for goddamn sure. But looks like he's lost. The betting odds still have him. I was talking about that last week. They had him at like 12%. He's at like 8% now, which I don't think he's going to win. I think he's going to just drag this shit out, and then he'll just be able to say that he got robbed. Like, that's literally all he's hanging on to at this point. And it's pretty crazy because he straight up is just still tweeting. Like, he tweeted last night. He's like, yeah, I won. It's Monday right now. He's on Sunday, November, 15th or 14th or whatever. He straight up tweeted, 15th. He's like, I won the election. You'll see. He's like, he's really leaning into being this crazy old man. He's just like, you'll see. You'll all see. And you're like, dude, you lost. Like, it's over, man. It's crazy, too. He got fucked. Because as much as he really, hates on the Chinese for dropping this virus on us, if it wasn't for them, he probably would have almost won by a landslide. Like, he was looking like, not to say that he didn't have any hand in doing this himself. He definitely could have managed things quite a bit better in terms of, believing that coronavirus was a problem at all and, not being insane. But he got fucked too with the vaccines. They screwed. That was such a wrestling level screw job. That was like the Bret the Hitman Hart level screw job, essentially. So I talked about it last week. So Pfizer came out on Monday, the Monday after the election, and they go, oh, we got a vaccine. It's 90% effective, which is like way better than they thought. It's like, everybody rejoiced. They're like, we got a vaccine. The only issue with it was that it can't drop below minus 70. I believe it's Celsius or Fahrenheit, because it's so unstable that the moment it gets below minus 70. So they're kind of like having some problems with how they're going to get it to people and store it. But they'll figure that out. There's a lot of smart people working behind the scenes. I often think to myself, I'm like, man, imagine I got put in charge of this shit. Everybody would just be dead. That's all that would happen, is everybody would just be like, yeah, I'd be like, yeah, I'm not. I've often thought about that too. Like, in a doomsday scenario where like kind of like a last man on earth kind of thing. And then I'd have to figure out because you'd know all the technology and stuff. Like, there were these things called batteries, and there was TV, and there was radio, and there was all this stuff, but I wouldn't know how to do anything. Like, I could just again, I guess if you're the last person on earth, though, because every one of those last person on earth shows, basically what happens is they are the last person on earth, but then it turns out they're not. Because if you're the last person on earth, and if you're watching a movie about a person who's the last person on earth, that was kind of, I just lisped there. But if you're if you're watching a movie or a TV show about the last person on earth, and then they're literally the last person on earth, it's kind of pointless. You're like, okay, so then what? Best case scenario, you grow old by yourself. You maybe find a dog you can bang. I don't know. What's the scenario there? What are you doing? you're just going to die. Like, you're guaranteed to die. There's no chance of reproducing. You're just basically waiting. But I think in most scenarios, I don't know if there's ever been a movie or a TV show where the last, someone can DM me or whatever, tweet at me and correct me, but I'm not sure that there's ever been a literal, like a show or a TV movie where there's an actual last person on Earth where they never find anybody else. But I do think about that, where I'm like, imagine you're the last person. Even if there was 5 of you, you go, we're the last 5 people, and then people are like, okay, so let's try and rebuild. And I'm like, dude, I don't know. I could barely make a fire. I can honestly barely make a fire. And we're like, imagine you're like, and you have a cell phone. And you're like, how are we going to do this? I'm like, we are not going to do this. We are not going to do this. But anyways, yeah. So Trump they had this Moderna vaccine, they had the Pfizer vaccine. And then today, Moderna came out, a different vaccine company. And they're like, we have one. Ours is 94.5% success rate or whatever the fuck. They go, listen up, Pfizer, you can suck a dick because we have a way better vaccine than you. And theirs doesn't need to be stored at -70 or whatever the fuck. But the timing of these releases is certainly interesting because the more I've kind of read about it, they didn't just Pfizer didn't find out on Sunday that this vaccine was ready to go. They knew before the election, which is pretty crazy to think that, because the thing is, forever, Trump, 6 months ago, 5 months ago, Trump was like, by the election, we're going to have a vaccine. We're going to have a vaccine ready to go before the election. And everybody's just like, you are full of shit, dude. You're full of shit. You're just saying this because you want to get reelected. Everybody knows you're lying. You're a fucking liar. And then he was right. They actually did have the vaccine, and then they just chose not to release the info. They don't find out about it on the Sunday before. They knew about this before the election, and obviously they don't want to deal with this motherfucker because he's a pain in the ass, and they probably don't like him. But it's an amazing amount of power that they had, because Pfizer could have, and again, had they released it, it's interesting. I wonder what kind of blowback, if on the, if they released it literally 1 week earlier on the Monday before the election, the day before the election, had they released that information, which they most certainly had available. I don't know if it would have swayed the election at that point because of all the mail-in voting or whatever. And maybe, their decision was we just want to be not involved with this one way or another. Because you got to imagine a lot of the Democrats would have been fucking pissed if they released that information and Trump goes, see, with his fucking shit-eating grin he always has, he goes, see, I got you your vaccine, just like I said, Operation Warp Speed or whatever the fuck. And then he wins the election. Oh, man, they would have been salty. They would have burned the city down. They would have burned a lot of cities down, which I'm at least grateful that didn't happen. And then this other vaccine comes out, which, again, they definitely had this information prior to. My guess is that I wonder how, what's the thinking that goes into that? Are they were they about to release their vaccine information and then Pfizer beat them to it? And they're like, well, we're not going to release it on the same day. That's not a good idea. So then they're like, well, we'll wait a week. And then I'm sure someone else next week is going to be. The fact is that if these two companies have managed to do it, there's got to be some other companies who are up next. So, anyways, Trump is gonzo, and he's getting pretty crazy. He's definitely he's getting pretty crazy. He's just won't concede, which whatever. He doesn't need to concede. They'll go through the formal process and whatever the fuck. He had his Million Maga March on the weekend in Washington, D.C. That was pretty funny just to see. Because I think I talked about this last week where I was like, I don't think they're going to get 1 million people. I was skeptical. And they definitely didn't. Kayleigh McEnany, she was like, look at this, hundreds of thousands of people. It's funny how everybody just talks up their side or whatever. They're like hundreds of thousands of people. It's clearly not hundreds of thousands of people. Maybe 50,000, maybe 80,000. I don't know. It was tens of thousands, certainly. Million, they go and they want to stop the steal, even though there's not really any sort of credible evidence of actual theft. That'd be crazy. If that comes out where they're like, look, we have real evidence of theft, that'll be a game changer. I don't think it's going to happen at this point. But who knows? But it's funny because it's like all the, he's trained his base into thinking that they were going to get fucked over before it even happened. So then, of course, now they think that. It's funny, too, how other outlets, like, talk about it, too, like Global News in Canada, which is, like, I think they're, like, left-leaning news organization in Canada. They tweeted, they got like lit up, ratioed hard on Twitter. They tweeted about it and they're like, hundreds of people gather for the Million Maga March. It's like literally looks like a fucking World Series parade. And they go, hundreds of people. And you're like, hundreds of people? Like, aren't you supposed to be like, can't you pretend to be a journalist for a day? It's like, what will it, like, I don't even think, like, do they think it's like, are they trolling? Like, and if they're trolling, you're like, you're supposed to be legitimate news sites. You're not supposed to be trolls. I like trolling as much as anybody. But, like, if that's what they're doing, like, you're trying to pretend like you're, a real news organization. And they're like, look at that, hundreds of people. And you're like, what? Anyways, it was funny. People were angry. I don't care. It's just, it's funny for them to, pretend like they're these serious journalists, and then they're like hundreds of people in a giant crowd. There was it's funny watching the internet work too. Like, so there was one video, of course, like, I went on Twitter, I'd be like, oh, there's gonna be some fucking brawls for sure. And it's so funny how just everybody, like, people don't really try and hide their bias. Like, they have a cause and they're trying to further their cause, just like Global News or whatever, Kayleigh McEnany or whatever the fuck. They're just, their thing is like, look, we have an agenda. And at least it's nice when they, like, try and, like, they don't lie about the fact that they have an agenda. It's so weird when these people who have agendas, though, will like loosely throw around the term fake news about the other side. But so there's a video of this guy that was making the rounds on all like the conservative Twitter. And he's basically, he's like, in this, so they started at the exact right time. The video, like at least the clip that they share starts at the exact right time. And he's in this group of like protesters or whatever. And then he starts like, they start kicking him and hitting him or whatever. And then he's trying to like get away. And then one comes up to him and like sucker punches him and knocks him out cold. Like he goes fucking stiff. Like I've seen, like this is the thing too. I was talking about this before on a different podcast, but like, I was just like, I've seen so many people get hit by cars. I mean, so many people just knocked unconscious on Twitter this year. Like it's a lifetime's worth of people get sucker punched out cold at a political rally on Twitter. It's beyond bizarre, but I mean, I guess that's where we're at. But anyway, so the video is, and then everybody on conservative Twitter, they're like, see, oh, could you imagine if this, it was like, I even think people like Ivanka Trump and like high level people are like, oh, could you imagine if this was a Biden supporter and a Biden supporter got knocked out by a bunch of Trump supporters? Could you imagine what would happen? Like how much that would be in the news, blah, blah, blah. And the funny thing is they're right. It would be in the news because they would be lying as well to further their side of the argument. But so then, someone else shares the video and go, here's the whole video. And then you see the whole video and the guy like literally goes like attacks a crowd of people. He like goes in the crowd and like someone like grabs someone's like bullhorn. He's basically trying to start a fight. Yes, he did get knocked out cold and kind of like sucker punched from behind as he was like retreating, but he completely started the fight. Like he was totally like the aggressor in that thing. And the moment you see that, you're like, yeah, he kind of had it coming to him. I don't think you should be sucker punching a guy when he's trying to get away. But also, I'm not against it completely. I'm not completely against it. But it's just funny because just people they find these things and they just use it for their side. They go, here's the thing. Doesn't matter if it's true or not. I just use it for my side. Like I've like in the past posted things on Twitter that were like, hey, can you believe this? This is crazy. And then someone would be like, hey, yeah, that's like out of context. And if you look at it, it's, there's actually more to it. And then that's not the correct context. And I'll delete it. I'll just be like, oh, like I've had things where it's like, a tweet where it's like not gone viral or anything, but like maybe 100 people retweet it. And like, it's like, and people are like, oh my God, can you believe this? And then someone's like, hey, you know what? here's the context of that, like it, and then I look into it further, and I usually look into everything I tweet because I'm just like, I find it like, I don't know, just you lose credibility when you just tweet stuff specifically like just to get a reaction you're going to get from a certain side. Like, it's just, I don't know, it's especially as a comedian, it's like, it's fucking cringy because like I don't really have a dog in the fight. Like I don't really consider myself on one side or the other. I don't like, I don't want to take a side, really. And I know people would say, well, if you're not going to take a side, then you're a Nazi, which seems like a pretty cool thing to be a Nazi. They dress well. Actually, and they like this is here's a perfect example. Speaking of Nazis, so there's a photo the day of the Million Maga March, which some smart people on Twitter, they started a hashtag Million Moron March. I bet they felt like they were very smart with that use of changing Million Maga March to Million Moron March. Very smart. Very clever they are. But so there was a photo, and it's from, they go, oh, check out the picture from today's Million Maga March. They go, like there were different captions for it, but essentially being like, people on the right, people on the left, we're all the same. Let's all come together and just heal or whatever. And the photo is like a guy with a table, and he's selling like a Confederate flag, one of those like "Don't Tread on Me" flags, and then a Nazi flag. He's got like a camper van, kind of like van, and he literally has just like a giant Nazi flag hanging from his van. And people are like, oh, look at this. And like, I saw so many people retweeting this photo being like, with the hashtag Million Maga March, Million Moron March, whatever. So many people retweeting this, right? And it takes like, that's the thing, is it takes 2 fucking seconds. You click on the photo, and then scroll down. This is on Twitter, obviously. Scroll down, or you can do a reverse image search if you are so inclined. But you don't need to, because there's always one person, if you just scroll down for 2 seconds, who's like, yeah, this is from 4 years ago, from a totally different thing. Now, again, they would say, well, it doesn't matter because it's the same people or whatever. But you're literally trying to be like, this happened today. They're flying Nazi flags selling Nazi flags at the Million Maga March or whatever. And that just like did not happen. And it's funny because people post this stuff. Like I could have posted that and got 1,000 retweets being like, hey, could you believe what's happening at the Million Moron March today? They're selling Nazi flags. And like, yeah, I know that that tweet would blow up, but I'm like, I have fucking scruples. I don't actually have scruples. It's the first time I've ever probably even used that word, scruples. I don't even know if I use it right, but I just, you're not doing that. But I just saw 50 people who were like, hey, here's an opportunity to get 50 retweets. And they pop this thing up, and it's getting weird too, because like I follow a lot of people on Twitter because I want like a varying degree of perspectives, but it's getting to the point where some of them are just fucking infuriating me so much and on both sides, obviously, like the people on the right with their brutal Trump takes about like, oh, we're just gonna win this, stop the steal, blah blah blah, and then all the people on the left who are like, every one of these people are like Nazis, blah blah. And I'm like, I'm moving to Parler. I'm not going to Parler. Everybody's going to Parler right now. That's the big one. Everybody's like, let's delete Twitter and head over to Parler. I'm like, I'll fucking just as soon not have social media than just have Parler. Like, I love that's everybody's like, we're going over to Parler. It's the independent free speech Twitter or whatever. It's like, first off, it's a brutal platform. It sucks to use. I'm like, I'm not fucking using Parler. I think I maybe talked about this last week. I don't know, but it's been gaining steam. Everybody's like, it's the number 1 app in the App Store. Everybody's like, come over to Parler. I'm like, no, I'm not going over to Parler. No, thank you. Not happening. What else we got? This is neither here nor there, but I saw a man on the street wearing an I can't breathe coronavirus mask, and couldn't help but think that's pretty funny. I know that it's a George Floyd reference, and I know that person is trying to make a statement regarding civil rights and police brutality, but on the surface, that is a hilariously funny mask because it's a mask covers your mouth that says, I can't breathe. So I don't know why I brought that up. I made a note for myself in my notes that said, I can't breathe masks. And then I was looking through my notes for the next topic, and then I thought, damn, that's a funny mask. That's, I don't know if that would be classified as a novelty mask. See, that's the thing, is like, because COVID started before George Floyd. And if George Floyd had never happened, then there might actually be I can't breathe masks that just fall in the realm of like novelty masks, right? Like they're just straight up. Although I guess Eric Garner had it first, so the I can't breathe thing did happen previous to COVID. So you know what? I take that back. But it's a borderline novelty mask. You know, it's like it's almost on par with Show Me Your Tits, but not quite, because you know there's people have died. Although I'm sure people have asked someone to show them their tits and died. So, it is what it is, I guess. I'm in New York right now. Lockdowns are coming. Lockdowns are nigh at hand. I also don't know if that's the correct use of that term, but we do have lockdowns coming. Not pumped about it. It's only a matter of time too. Like they just locked down Philadelphia today until January 1st, straight up. All bars, restaurants, gyms are closed until January 1st. It's November 17th when you're listening to this, so pretty decent lockdown. They changed in New York. Chicago had a similar thing, although not quite to that extent. New York, they last week, starting this most recent Friday, is that the correct way to say it? Yeah, this most recent Friday, this past Friday, same thing. They changed the bar hours to 10 p.m. They're like, all right, we're closing every bar and restaurant at 10 p.m., which is just obviously, I mean, as businesses, it's fucking them over so badly. Oh, it's hard to see it because you know there's no stimulus coming, and it's just the government. You know, these businesses are just getting fucked. But the city of New York is basically at like I think 2.8% positivity rate, and I think at 3% is when a full lockdown is basically going to come, or somewhere in and around that, where they're going to start closing schools. And the thing is, people just are over the lockdowns here. Nobody really cares about them. So like I was doing a set at the Stand Comedy Club on Saturday night. I was hosting a show there. It was a great, sold out show, even though it was outdoors. It was fucking freezing too. It was like, I don't know. I'm trying to think what it is. My brain doesn't work in Fahrenheit. I only think in Celsius because I'm from Canada. It was like 8 degrees Celsius, maybe like 52. Too cold for comedy, but it was fine. You just have to wear a jacket and whatever. But it's, you know, it's getting close where you're like, yeah, this is real. Like I was telling myself a month ago that outdoor comedy shows were kind of cutting it close. And then now we're at like, now it's getting really close. But anyways, did a show and then went and met up with a friend, and we were like, you know what, let's go get some alcohol, and we're going to go back. And we go to the liquor store. The liquor store's packed at 10:30. The liquor stores, or it wasn't even 10:30. It was probably like 10:05. So everybody's just going out to a friend's house. They're just keeping the party going elsewhere. I saw a thing where there was a fight club in the Bronx with like 200 people got broken up on Saturday night. The thing is, there's just the will to lock down. Unfortunate, whether it's good or bad, it's over. It's like people don't really want to do it, especially younger people. They're like, look, and especially like New York in the winter, like when it's cold, it's like, it's one thing when, you know, you can go hang out in a park, but they're taking even that away. It's dark at 5:00. So I just don't think that this 10 p.m., this magical 10 p.m. mandate is going to just automatically like lower the fucking positivity rate. So basically, we're fucked. We're getting locked down again. It's only a matter of time. It's the same thing that happened in Toronto, where I used to live. They shut everything down for a month, and they're like, "Look, we're just going to shut everything down for a month. The rates are getting too high, and then in a month everything will be fine. And then in a month, nothing fucking changed. So they're like, "Okay, we'll just extend this longer." And you're like, "But it didn't work for a month. Why do you think it's gonna?" Like, I get that they're just trying to bide time for the hospitals or whatever, but, like, you can't just stay locked down indefinitely. Like, you got to figure something else out. I guess that's their thing. Is like, look, if you as citizens cannot keep this positivity rate down, then we're gonna lock your asses down. I don't think they would say it like that, but I mean, it's crazy too. Like the lines, and you walk around New York right now, and consistently, you'll see if you walk by any sort of like health clinic, especially like I walked by one today. Like I walked by one on Saturday, and there was just this big line. I actually like at first didn't realize what it was for. It was in Williamsburg in Brooklyn, and I just like it's just like because it's a socially distanced line, so it's like it's hard to tell. Like at first it looks like a line, but then it was like wrapping around the block, and there was like people selling stuff, so it was hard to tell if someone was like just like looking at some person's like necklaces they're selling on a table, or if they were in line. But they were in line. There's a long ass line, and we asked someone, and they're like, "Yeah, we've been in line for like a few hours to get a COVID test." And I don't even think these are people who are sick. They're just like they just want to know if they have it. They're willing to just take 3 hours on a Saturday just to find out. Like, I guess some people need to know for reasons if they're gonna go visit family for Thanksgiving or whatever, but. Thanksgiving's canceled this year anyways. They canceled Thanksgiving. Well, they're going to anyways. They're telling people not to do stuff. I went to the grocery store today. Crazy line. It actually felt a bit today like March-ish, where like people were like, you know, there were too many people. Like it was a Monday afternoon. I was like, there's too many people at the grocery store. Like I went specifically to like miss the rush, and then I'm like, this is a fucking packed grocery store. Like it's a Trader Joe's, and so if you've ever been to a Trader Joe's, there's a person in the Trader Joe's who holds up a stick that says the line starts here when it's too big, so that they can like basically, you know, have a line snaking throughout the entire store. And this is in the East Village in New York, and you go down an escalator, and basically the line started the moment you go down the escalator. Not even that, there was a line to get in. There was a line to get in, so I had to wait in line for probably like 5 minutes. So it wasn't that bad, even though it was a bigger line because, you know, they're working. They have a decent turnover. But then you get in, and instantly you're like, once you get to the bottom of the escalator, like that's where the line starts. So you go do all your grocery shopping, and then you'll go like, the thing is everybody's giving dirty looks. Like tensions are high, like because you'll go to like get a thing, and then someone thinks you're butting in line because you basically have to like go through the line, and it like wraps around the edge of the store. So who knows what's going to happen, but I think they're going to lock shit down here. COVID is not to be fucked with. Elon Musk got COVID. I don't know if you saw that. Elon Musk, and he's bitter about it. He is not happy about it. He tweeted the other day that he took 4 tests. 2 of them came back positive. 2 of them came back negative. And we're all fucked. That's really the takeaway for this is like, yeah, Elon Musk, again, he did think that COVID would be done in April. He was like pretty sure that COVID would be done with in April. So, you know, as of all the good things he does, and I'm a big Elon Musk guy, don't get me wrong here, but he was basically tweeting. It's funny too because he tweeted, he's like, yeah, I got 2 tests. 4 tests, 2 came back positive, 2 came back negative. I have, you know, mild cold feeling, and then all these people are like, this is such an irresponsible tweet. Like all the fucking losers on the internet were like, this is such an irresponsible tweet. Speaking of losers on the internet, actually, I was thinking about talking about this, but then I was like, you know what, I'm not. But then I just decided I am, because I was talking about The Stand. I was at the Stand Comedy Club. So there's this comedy labor journalist. So there's like basically comedy. There's like a far left-wing component of comedy. They're essentially like communists, not really communists, but they're like close. They've all read Communist Manifesto, not ironically. But so there's a guy, his name's Seth Simons. He's a bit of a rabble-rouser, bit of a troublemaker, if you will. I can't tell if he considers himself a troll, really, but so he's definitely a fucking loser. He's a comedy journalist. He gets in all these fights with comedy clubs. Basically, he's like a snitch. I would say he's like a comedy snitch is like the best really way to put it. He's the guy who got Shane Gillis in trouble last year when Shane Gillis got on Saturday Night Live. He's like a disgruntled ex-comedian who like became a comedy journalist. You know, he just couldn't cut it, and like I guess he maybe feels that like the people who are successful in comedy are kind of the in group, and he's maybe like an outsider, and so he's just gonna, you know, he's like a tattletale, I guess. Like, and I don't want to like. it's a weird way to classify him as a tattletale because, you know, obviously you could say lots of whistleblower journalists are tattletales, but he's not really accomplishing anything. Like his motives are not like for the greater good. His motives are really only to like just be vindictive towards comedy. Like he's not like nobody's gonna like look back on the end of COVID and be like, you know who really helped defeat COVID in New York City was the fucking comedy journalists. Nobody's gonna say that. Like there's no benefit that he's providing to anybody other than just being a fucking pain in the ass. But so he basically got Shane Gillis kicked off of SNL, which is pretty crazy. I mean, I guess there's some sweet comedy journalism, and he got him kicked off for doing a racism. Because Shane Gillis made like an inappropriate joke about Asians on a podcast. And you're like, wow, that's definitely worth getting fired from your job. Definitely doing the Lord's work there, man. You know, SNL would have definitely never recovered from that. But so I guess his whole thing has always just been like causing problems with specifically the Stand Comedy Club where I work the most. And it's like one of the best comedy clubs. But so he gets in all these arguments with the owner, and the owner gets in all these arguments with him online, and then he gets in all these arguments with people from like the Legion of Skanks, all those fans of this podcast, and then I think they started to dox his family because he lives in like Idaho. He doesn't live in New York anymore. He like moved from COVID, but he's still causing problems. But then I was like looking at I went to go look at his because sometimes I'll go look at his Twitter page just to see what he's up to, and he locked it, which means I guess he's getting a lot of heat for whatever. But so this is his most recent article. He has like a Substack, like there's like he's a left-leaning comedy journalist. I think that's how he describes it. So this is his most recent one from like 2 days ago. Comedy fans rejoice. Here are some photos of SNL's After Party at the Stand last week. So Dave Chappelle hosted SNL last weekend, and he had an after party. My friend was there. Chris Rock was there. Jim Carrey was there. A lot of famous people were there. Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters. It was a real to-do. It was really sounded like a cool party. It was an after party. I was there the night before at the Stand. Dave Chappelle was doing a show in the basement, a private show, where basically in order to go to the show, you needed to be COVID tested. Like literally in order to just go downstairs, they gave you one of those like nasal swab rapid COVID tests, and you have to wait in this like pen of chairs. And then wait in this pen of chairs, and then once you got your test, they put a wristband on you and you went right downstairs. Okay. So pretty pretty safe, I'd say, taking a lot of precautions. So he this is his big scoop. And this is the thing. It's literally like on a public, this guy Cypher Sounds, who's like this DJ dude / comedian. It's on his Instagram page, like posting photos of this SNL After Party with like Jim Carrey and all this shit, right? So he goes, as you can see from a pair of Instagram posts by the DJ Cypher Sounds, the celebration was held at the Stand, the Union Square Comedy Club, known for its pizzas, burgers, and vaccine skeptic owner. That's, I think, a reference to the dude he gets in all these beefs with. So, and there's Talib Kweli was there, who I had seen the night before. Pretty cool. And then DJ Cypher Sounds in the photo wrote, "We were all rapid COVID tested, so shut up." And then all these people, all these people were like, who were there, Michelle Wolf, Michael Che, all these people from SNL. And it says everybody was COVID tested on site, right? And then he goes, the New York State Liquor Authority's guidelines for reopened restaurants do not permit live comedy. They do allow live music, and DJs provided performances are incidental to the dining experience and follow all other guidelines. Patrons should not be standing except for necessary reasons. Standing patrons should wear a face. It says performers should be at least 12 feet from patrons. This wasn't a fucking open bar. Like, this wasn't an open club. It was a goddamn private event. Like, you can have a private group get together. It's like, it seems crazy. Like, and I'm like, and anyways, and he goes, as epidemiologist Lisa M. Lee told me last month, COVID-19 rapid tests are notorious for their false negatives. Like, so who is he protecting? Like, he's protecting Jim Carrey from getting COVID? Like, I don't really understand what he's trying to, what this journalism that he's doing is even accomplishing. And he goes, I reported last month that the Stand appeared to run afoul of health restrictions when it hosted an indoor podcast recording for a live audience. Like, And basically, so because the Stand is a restaurant, this is what the context you have to understand too. The Stand is like an actual functioning restaurant. It's not just like most comedy clubs are pretty much, especially in New York, are just comedy clubs. The Stand is more of a restaurant than a comedy club. It just happens to be like designed perfectly, where it has these comedy venues, like stages as well, right? But so like they're allowed to have, X amount of tables and X amount of people sitting at those tables, but because the law in New York is that you're just blanket not allowed to have comedy. So like you can have all these people sitting at the table. The moment some guy stands up and starts talking, that's like now you're like violating the law, even though it doesn't affect anything. All those people are still sitting down. They're not wearing masks because they're eating dinner. Like you still have to like have a mask on if you're going to like go to the restroom or whatever from the table. But the moment that you just have a guy start talking to these people sitting in their tables, apparently you're like violating this rule, which I understand the rule, but it's just like, it's stupid for him. And like his whole thing is he's like, but what about COVID? We're worried about COVID. And you're like, you're not helping anything. This guy's fucking such a weasel. And I can't, like I was talking with my friend, I'm like, we can't tell if he's just become an actual troll at this point. He can't really take himself seriously. And it's interesting because all these comedy clubs are closing. And that's actually why I was checking on it, because so there's this club called the Creek in the, like lots of comedy clubs are starting to close. This club, Dangerfield's closed. Creek in the Cave, which is like all these people were like so wistful about the Creek in the Cave. And they're like, oh, it's so sad. It was this club in Long Island City. Like I have a feeling by the time COVID wraps up, at least 50% of comedy clubs in New York City will have closed. At least 50% of comedy clubs in the world, or at least North America, will close, because I can't really understand how businesses can stay afloat through all of this. But so like all these people were like, oh, it's so sad. And then you go on Twitter and all him and his fucking like improv friends are like, that was the most toxic place ever. I hated that place. Everybody like bullied us. And you're like, it kind of just has this like real high school vibe where like they're just still they're still in high school, and like they just, I don't know, there's something about them that like, because you could tell you're like, this is also the person you were then. Like, not to be like victim blaming, not to say that they're victims, because they're not, but like all these people were like, definitely like, they're like, oh, it's funny to see all these people are like, this is the greatest, most formative place. And all these people are like, good riddance, most toxic place ever. And you're like, shut the fuck up. All right. That's the end of my rant on Seth Simons. But yeah, the comedy clubs, a lot of them are going to be closed. I went to this evening actually with Ryan Long and a guy who actually owns another comedy club, who I'm not going to name, but he's hanging in there. He's hanging in there, and he's even opening another club. It looks like he's gonna get through this. But we went to this restaurant, this Serbian restaurant near my house, and like we went. I made a reservation. It's a Monday, but I made a reservation. Go in there. And basically like they're empty. I'm like, hey, I have a reservation. They're like, and she was all sarcastic. She's like, oh, let me check your reservation. And I'm like, oh, I know. I just want to let you know that like we're the reservation group. I guess unnecessary. But she was like, anyways, we sat down, and then at the end, like it was like a restaurant. Literally, we're the only group of people in there. They're forced to close at 10 p.m. Not to say that it would have always been busy on a Monday, but this is like a really well-reviewed restaurant. Online and stuff. And then the funniest thing actually too is Ryan Long. I was with Ryan Long, and so he ordered like the woman, like, because he's not like a super foodie guy really. He's like quite the opposite. And then the woman, this made me laugh a lot. The woman was like, she's the server or whatever. I think she probably owns the restaurant too. But she's like, yeah, so one of our specials tonight is like a fish. It's like comes with potatoes. And Ryan's like, oh, that sounds good. I'll take the fish. And then it comes out, and it's an entire grilled fish, like bone in, head on, everything. Ryan hates shit like that. Like Ryan literally was like, I thought it was gonna be chicken. Like he thought it was gonna be fish sticks, and then it was this is whole fish. And then like he's like, can I get like, and it came with this like oil garlic sauce or whatever, which like just did not do it for him, because it was just like the idea of him like picking apart a fish to him is like he doesn't want bones or anything. And then so he's like, can I get like some ketchup? And he literally ordered ketchup to put on a grilled white fish. It was fucking bizarre. But I ended up giving him half of my meals, and I just had some of his fish because I'm like, yeah, you just eat around the bones. It's actually really good. His fish was way better than the thing I ordered. I just never thought to order a fucking fish. But the look on his face when he got an entire fucking fish, priceless. Yeah, but so where was? Oh yeah. Anyway, so they're fucked, and then she was like, at the end of our meal, she was like, "Hey, can I ask you a couple questions?" And we're like, "Sure." And she's like, "Do you guys order like stuff delivery?" And like she was basically like, you could tell that like they're on their last ditch, and now they're like, we have to get in the delivery game, because I guess at this point they had held out, because like, yeah, we don't do delivery. They're like, you don't order an entire grilled fish and fucking deliver it. Like, that's insane. Like, you just don't do that. Like, by the time it gets to your house or whatever, it'll just be, there's a lot of stuff you just need to eat fresh. But you could tell they were desperate, because she was like asking us all these questions. She's like, what kind of, if you do order, like, delivery, what app do you use? And she was asking us all these questions, and I just felt bad. I was like, fuck. A lot of businesses are not going to do well. It's the Great Reset, as fearless leader Justin Trudeau says of Canada. This has actually caused a fucking huge stink. This drove a lot of people crazy too. So Justin Trudeau, Canadian Prime Minister, he was doing on Global News. Actually, here's a callback. Global News. He was doing a interview on Global News, and then he said this. He says, "This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset. This is our chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts to reimagine economic systems that actually address global challenges like extreme poverty, inequality, and climate change," he added. Now, I agree with this. I'm like I actually do agree that like this pandemic has given the opportunity to like rethink the way things are done, and like, there is like a weird reset, even though like the reset is going to be at the expense of like lots of people. Like a lot of people are going to get washed out in this reset. But like that term, like this great reset, was like all these conspiracy theorists had been using like this as being like, yeah, it's this whole scamdemic thing is just part of this like great reset plan that they have, that they want to do all this stuff. And then he basically just set all these fucking conspiracy people off because he said it. He goes, yeah, the Great Reset. And they're like, excuse me, did you just say the Great Reset? And again, I know what he's talking about, even though, it's, they're going to be able to do a great reset in terms of like some things. And there is like, I've talked about this before on this podcast, but like me and Ryan Long had been talking forever about how like comedy needed the comedy industry needed a reset. Like, it needed some sort of big event to come like wash out all of the kind of just like, shitty, like people who didn't really like, weren't super into it, or they were into it for the wrong reasons, and they were kind of just like clogging up the system and needed to like, wash out. Like, this is a real pivot, like at least for comedy, at least for live comedy. Like, when everything comes back, it's going to be such a different landscape. Half the comedians are going to be gone. You're going to never hear from, like, I know big time pro comedians who are like, yeah, I'm not ever going back to comedy for one reason or another. They're like, this setback, like, just took away any inertia they once had. They're just like, I can't go back to it. So many people who are like, kind of mid-career who like were like, I have to leave I'm leaving New York. And like, if you move away from New York, if you move to New York to pursue comedy, then this happened. And then you move back to fucking like Nebraska, you're not coming back to New York. It's going to be, you just aren't coming back. But then all these clubs are also going to be closing down. So like when comedy starts up again, assuming that new clubs don't open, it's just the landscape's going to be totally different. And then there eventually will be new clubs to open, you would have to think. But it is a great reset. But anyways, Trudeau fucking, I kind of like, though. I like triggering the conspiracy theorists. There's something funny about like setting off the conspiracy theory crazies, because then they're like, what the fuck did you say about a great reset? But there's some shady shit, not shady shit, but scary shit going on. Like Dallas, Texas today in the news, there was thousands of people lined up in a North Texas food bank for basically food, because they don't have money for food. And there's like 6,000 cars, 25,000 people lined up. They had like, they have a drone flying to show all the people. And it's like, it's crazy. Like I know that obviously like America has its problems or whatever, but it's supposed to be, last I checked, the most prosperous nation on earth. And, obviously years, every year they do have like, there is, people who fall on hard times, but this year is just extra. And then they're not. I really don't get how people are getting through this. Like, if you're a small business owner or anything, like, the government gave you some money in March or April or whatever the fuck, and then you've just been hung out to dry since November. They have another stimulus plan, but like, what are they going to be like in February? They're like, here's another $1,200 on top of the $1,200 we gave you in April. You're like, what does that even do? I'm not even sure what that's meant to do. But it's bad. It's going to be bad. Hopefully they'll get through it. And it's funny too, because like, obviously I follow the stock market, and the stock market is, you follow the stock market, they're like, everything's great. It could not be better. And then you go to like Main Street and you go, I go into this restaurant today and they're like, like you walk around my neighborhood in East Village and sometimes you'll walk by 5 or more like storefronts in a row that are out of business. Like, normally it'd be like, here's one, and then you walk, 8 more that are open, and then there's one closed, and it's just like one after another that's closed. It's frightening. Let's go across the pond for a little European news. This is actually pretty crazy. I wonder if this will be something. I can't see this happening in America just because of guns, but so in Denmark, they basically were trying to pass a forced vaccination law, which is pretty crazy. And then people, there were crazy protests for 9 straight days. I believe it was 9 days protesting. And to the point where Parliament was like, okay, we're not going to pass this law. It was called the epidemic law. And basically what it was going to do is they were going to basically, the Danish health authority would be able to define certain groups of people who have to be vaccinated in order to contain the virus. So they'd be like, look, these groups, you need to be vaccinated. Like I imagine it would be based on like, if you have certain underlying conditions or comorbidities or whatever, or like you're in certain groups. And then basically people who refuse to get vaccinated, like the government puts you in this group, they refuse to vaccinate you. And then if they refuse to vaccinate you, they can be coerced through physical detainment with police allowed to assist. So basically the police would like snatch you up, strap you down, and they would fucking forcibly put a vaccine in you. Like, that's the thing, is like, I laugh at some of the conspiracy theorists sometimes, but that's fucking crazy. Like, that's essentially the conspiracy theorist's worst nightmare, is the government coming with a show of force, strapping you down and forcibly giving you a vaccine that you think is going to give you autism. Like, that is fucking scary. That is a overreach. Like, you know what? You got to handle this pandemic, but you can't like you just take the nuclear option and just force people to do that shit. But anyways, so that was a big thing. I couldn't even believe it too. The crazy thing was, it wasn't in the news at all. Like, you think this would be something that would be slightly newsworthy, like just a little bit newsworthy, where like, one outlet somewhere, like, I didn't see this anywhere. The only place I saw it was like on some of the conservative people on Twitter I follow were talking about this. They were like, talking about how this like forced, but it's like, this is pretty crazy. Like, this isn't like a fringe thing, nor is this really like a partisan issue. It's just like, they were going to forcibly vaccinate people by like, by using the police based off of like, whatever random categories. I'm sure they weren't random, but still, like, they had 9 days of protests, which, proved effective, and like, this doesn't like even make a blip in the fucking news. I don't know. It was I thought it was pretty crazy. All right, we'll go to something lighter. We're gonna wrap this up. This might be the longest episode I've ever done. This is getting up there. If you're still listening, good for you. Good for fucking you. This is pretty funny. This is from some random gay magazine. It's like an op-ed or whatever, but it's it says, mask for mask, COVID-19 face coverings are changing queer cruising. And so basically, this guy is talking about how, it says, reading cues from a potential hookup in a mask can be tough, but over the years, queers have found creative ways to communicate desire and to stay connected. I'm like, don't they have Grindr? I'm like, I find it hard. Like, so this person's like, I love face masks for saving countless lives, but they are also seriously messing up my game. Since the COVID-19 pandemic began, I've started taking long, leisurely strolls, masked, of course, around the Castro district, San Francisco's historic neighborhood. As an international significant queer mecca with a robust history, the Castro is also an epicenter of unrelenting male cruising. So it's basically this person's like complaining because they're like, yeah, because of the mask, I'm trying to basically like find someone, random dude to fuck in the street, but I can't tell if, they're smiling at me or if they're not smiling at me because of their mask. And you're like, you have Grindr. Like, you have literally the easiest system/app ever set up to hook up. And you're complaining because these masks are just making it 3% more difficult for you to hook up. It's just nice though that like people can, people have problems. Like, but obviously never going to be an anti-masker because this person would never like consider ever being an anti-masker at all. But it's just funny that they find like this problem where they go, why can't you use a clear mask? Well, why can't that be a solution? Being like, look, all gay people just wear clear masks. I mean, don't make it mandatory or anything. You don't want to have like a Star of David Jew Nazi thing where you're like, it's mandatory that all gays wear clear masks. But I've seen people with clear masks on. It looks fucking weird. But if you're deaf or you hang out with people who are deaf who need to read lips, it's, it's a nice thing to do. So, anyways, it's funny to see that because no straight person would ever be like, you know what? These masks are really fucking up my hookup game pretty bad. If anything, it's the opposite. There's probably so many chicks and I would even say dudes too, like it goes both ways where, they meet someone and they're like, I mean, maybe not. I can't see that actually. Cause even if you're like, oh, that person's cute. And then they take off their mask and you're like, ugh, good God. Probably doesn't get much past that encounter. Like, it's not like masks are so mandatory that like you don't find out someone has a mask until you're like back at their house and you're like about to fuck and you're like, all right, then let's take this bad boy off. Good God. All right, last thing. Then we're going to wrap this bad boy up. From the world of sports, I cannot believe, for anybody who listens to this podcast, if you like sports, can you believe that the NBA is going to be back in like preseason starts in less than a month? That is crazy. It feels like it just ended and it's about to fire back up. It ended 1 month ago. And it's starting up in a month. There have been some crazy trades happening tonight. Drew Holiday just got traded. Who did he get traded to? The Bucks, instant contenders. James Harden apparently is going to the Nets, which is fucking mental. But this is from the world of football. So the NFL started a diversity hiring plan, which drew mixed feelings around the league. So basically, a new plan to incentivize NFL teams to develop and hire minority candidates for head coaching and general manager positions has not been met with the enthusiasm by people it is supposed to help. This is from ESPN. Multiple sources who are people of color told ESPN in recent days that there are, at best, mixed feelings about a plan approved this week that will award 2 third-round compensatory draft picks to teams that have minority head coaches or general managers hired away from their organizations. So basically what happens is that if you develop, like, you have an assistant coach or you have an executive and then a team hires them away from you, they basically poach them from your team, which is really common where players, executives move around, that you get 2 third-round draft picks in obviously different years for that executive. But it's like it's just such a weird thing because you're like, obviously people, the NFL they have, I think at the moment they only have like 2 black or 4 black head coaches and 2 black, they have 4 minority head coaches and 2 minority general managers. Although there have been firings which have got that up to 6, which is 6 out of 32, which is 25%, which 25% of head coaches is actually above like what the number is. Like, there's only, I don't know, well, I guess not of all minorities. That's the problem with this shit is like at which point, because like Ron Rivera, Riverboat Ron, he's not black, but is he getting he probably does get lumped into the category of he gets lumped into the category of minorities, right? Because he's Hispanic. But then, if you said like based on black head coaches, black people are only like, I don't know, 10 to 13 or whatever % of the population, something like that. So you're like, you shouldn't really be mad if they don't have like more than that amount. Like it should be around that amount for sure would be, I guess, the truly fair thing. But then the argument is that they're like, well, 70% of players in the NFL are black, and the NFL doesn't reward people based on the color of their skin, at least players. It's just like it's purely performance based. But then I guess there's, then you can't make an argument where you're like, well, because coaching is performance based as well. I don't know. This is a weird one because you're like, you never want to be like incentivizing people based off of like this weird, like just kind of diversity shit. Like it's one thing to be like, hey, we're going to make a point to try and hire more. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Like everybody's free to do that. Like actually a big deal is Miami Marlins, the baseball team. They just hired first general manager. She's a woman. I said she's a woman. Like she's a man. No, a woman, this Asian woman, something Ing. And you're like, but she's been in baseball for 30 years. She has like 4 World Series rings. It's like, I don't think they hired her because she's Asian or a woman. They just hired her because she's probably really qualified. But the moment that you start bringing this weird incentivization structure into it, then you start making people ask questions. Like whenever I see stuff now, like movies or TV shows or like anything where it's a super diverse cast, my first thought is I'm like, oh, is this like mandatory? Like, are these people like would these people never have been in this position to have this show or do this thing other than the fact that they just check a certain box? It's like, it almost like diminishes and takes away from that person's work. But then I don't know. This whole diversity thing's lame. I'm curious. I've been curious for many years now. I'm like, if Trump goes out of office, what happens to all this diversity stuff? Does it pick up? Does it go down? My thought is that it'll go down, but we shall see. We shall see. All right. That's enough rambling for me. We almost hit an hour. That's I think that's the longest episode I've ever done. It's late. It's almost 1 a.m. here. Gotta go edit this to post it in the morning. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. That has been episode 36. Someone messaged me and they said they want outro music on the podcast now. So we're going to have some fucking outro music from here on out. I don't know what it's going to be. It's probably going to be the beginning of the same song that I use at the beginning, but just a different part of it. But who knows? Anyways, if you enjoyed the episode, please give me a like if you're listening on YouTube or watching, and subscribe and leave me a review, because they help. All right, I'm rambling now. Peace out.